So why do functions sometimes take parameters and sometimes not? So let's see some of the examples we know already. For example, noStroke. noStroke doesn't take any parameters, but run or background, for example, does. Background 255. So when we are executing noStroke, we are just saying that we don't want borders on our shapes. There is no any specific information we want to tell noStroke. Everything is said when executing the function. We don't want borders. But in other cases like background, we want to specify which kind of color do we want. If there was no value, like no parameter sent, then how would processing know what color do we want? So we have to send some information. Sometimes it's one value or sometimes it's more than one, like in this case 3. So then processing knows something about how to change the background. Not just change the background in general, but change the background to red color. And then what's the difference between returning or not returning any value? Like these two functions do not return any value. They do something. They change the borders of the shapes or they change the background of the image, but we don't need to know anything back from the function. They just do their job and that's it. But then other functions like random, for example, random temp, random gives us some value back. If it wouldn't give you any value back, then it wouldn't be useful. So we store a random value inside a variable. So we want random to give something back, and there's lots of functions that give something back. We can see here mostly all the math functions, all these calculation functions, they will return something. For example, sqrt will calculate the square root of a number. Max will tell you which is the biggest number of all the numbers you send. It gives you the largest value in a sequence of numbers. So probably all the math functions will return something back, same like the trigonometry functions. So now that we know a little bit more about functions, let's see how we can improve the program we created last day, which is this rectangle rotating program. Because have a look at the source code. It's a bit repeating. We're doing the same thing several times. You can see here that we are doing a translate, rotate, rect, reset matrix, and then again, same. Translate, rotate, rect, and reset matrix. We do that 4 times. It's changing a little bit each time. The translate is not identical. You can see here we have 2 values, 100, 100, and the values are different. The rest is equal for now. The rotate is the same. The rect is always the same. So the only thing is changing is these 2 values, which mean where do we want our rectangle. So we could replace these 4 lines by 1 line. We could call this draw rotating rectangle. It's a bit long, but at least it's easy to understand. And we could just send here the 2 numbers that specify the location of our rotating rectangle. So see, now the program becomes much easier to understand here. These are all the values we entered. So you see, every time draw is executed, we are changing the background, 255 white color, and then we draw 4 rotating rectangles in different places on the screen. So now what we have to do is we have to create this function because we haven't yet said what it does. So this function will not return anything. So I will just use void, then use my function name, draw rotating rectangle. And I need 2 values here. So I will use float x and float y. Those are good names to specify a position in the screen. And now I have to just copy these 4 lines that I'm gonna be repeating. And I will paste them inside the function. And instead of using here any fixed numbers, they are gonna be variables. And these variables come from the function called down here. This way I can make part of my program here inside variable. So it's not fixed, it's not drawing always the rectangle at the same place, but I tell each time where I want it. And then I just rotate, and then I draw the rectangle, always the same size, and then I do the reset matrix. So now I can delete all this stuff down here, all these lines, they are gone. And I think this now is much easier to understand. What does this do for each frame? So it changes the background color and then draws a rotating rectangle. Does that 4 times, and then it increases the rotation. And we can run this and it's still working fine. If we would like to change something else, imagine we don't want always to use the same size, but we would like to have different sizes. So we could add a new parameter here, which is the size. And we could make the first 80, like the original one. Then we could make a small rectangle with 40, then one larger, 100, and a small one, 20. So I have to add here now a new parameter. If I try to run this, it will complain. It will say, well, my screen is a bit too small here to read the error message. But it's saying that basically here I have 3 parameters, but my function has only 2. So I will have to add here one called float rect size, for example. And now instead of using the fixed value of 80, I will use rect size. So now I can control the sizes of my rectangles. See, and the program doesn't become much more complicated, just a small change, and now it's much more flexible. So now I can have all these rectangles with different sizes. Now that we are using this function, see how easy it is to add a new rotating rectangle. I just have to add one new line. I could add this on the middle of the screen, for example. So I will say 200, 200. And I will make this the biggest of all these rectangles. So just one line. I say where I want the rectangle, and this is the size of the rectangle. And now I have just 5 rotating rectangles.